for joining us. I'm Steve Solis. We are just moments away from a debate for the state's 8th Congressional District. Incumbent Kim Schrier and her challenger Matt Larkin. This race is getting a lot of attention nationally. The seat was long held by the GOP, that is until Schrier was elected back in 2018. If it swings back, it could shake up the balance of the power in the House that the Democrats only have a slight majority in currently. District 8 covers a lot of ground on both sides of the Cascades. It includes parts of Snohomish, King, Pierce, Chelan, and Kittitas counties. Representative Schrier is seeking a third term. She's the only Democrat to ever represent the district. Republicans hoping to take that seat back with Matt Larkin, an attorney. Back in 2020, he lost his run for state attorney general. We want to take you live now shortly to the start of this debate. It's going to be at Central Washington University in Ellensburg. King 5's own Madison Wade is one of the moderators. We send you now to Ellensburg.
To you from McConnell Hall on the Central Washington University campus, with a special thanks to the Seattle City Club's Washington State Debate Coalition, in partnership with TVW, the statewide public affairs network, and KCTS 9 Crosscut. We also want to acknowledge the generous support of our many media partners and our sponsors, including AARP of Washington and Puget Sound Energy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Hannah Kim from Fox 13 News. I will be your moderator for this 8th Congressional District debate. I'm joined here by 3 local journalists, Madison Wade from King 5 TV. We've got Tracy Dial from KNDU TV and David Hyde from KUOW Radio. We will be asking the 2 8th Congressional District candidates, Matt Larkin and Congresswoman Kim Schrier, questions about a number of issues important to you, the voters. As you watch the debate, we invite you to join the conversation on social media using the hashtag you see on the screen there, WALX, and the rules are simple. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening statement and 60 seconds for a closing statement. Candidates will then alternate between having 60 seconds to answer initial moderator questions and 45 seconds for rebuttal per question. Also, please cite your sources. Talk about your own values instead of attacking your opponent's values. No personal attacks of any kind. Avoid stereotypes, jargon, and platitudes. Avoid interruptions and crosstalk, please. To the audience here today, we welcome you. You are here to learn from the candidates about where they stand on these important topics that impact you every day. Please remain silent throughout the debate, except to applaud at the beginning and at the end of this event. Take your time now to silence your cell phones. Anyone making noise, disrupting this debate, or any fellow audience members here will be asked to leave this auditorium. We tossed a coin backstage to determine who would make the first opening statement, and Mr. Larkin, you won that toss, so please present your opening statement. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel, and thank you to Central Washington University and to the Congresswoman for being here tonight. I have roots in this state. My family homesteaded here over 165 years ago. They came over on the Oregon Trail. They planted deep, deep roots here. And I'm proud of this place. I love this state. I have a business. I'm a co-owner of a family manufacturing business that makes Waterworks pipeline products. We bring clean drinking water proudly to people all around the world. And we're proud of what we do. And we're proud that we make our products here in the United States. My wife, Shelley, who's here tonight, and I are raising our 4 little kids. We have a 12-year-old Mac, a 10-year-old Miller, a 7-year-old Harrison, and a 4-year-old Isla Drew. And we're raising them in a state that we don't recognize anymore. For too long, we've had rising crime, homelessness, drug abuse. We've had rising inflation that seems out of control and gas prices that are hard to even comprehend right now. We don't need another 2 years of the same direction. We need to switch course. And if I'm elected as your congressman, I promise to roll up my sleeves on day 1 and get things back under control. I'm proud of Washington State. This is the most beautiful place on earth. But I want my 4 little kids to be as proud of this state as I am. And we're not headed in that direction right now. But I'm an optimist. And I think with your help and with a lot of changes, we can put our best days in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Your time is up. Congresswoman, your 90 seconds starts now.
Hi, I'm Kim Schrier, and I've been representing you in Congress for the past 4 years. Before that, I served the 8th District as a community pediatrician, taking care of children and families for almost 20 years. And I've brought that same spirit of service to Congress, going to bat for my constituents like I always did for my patients. And that means working with both parties to deliver real results that matter. I've had 14 bills signed into law, 8 signed by President Trump, and 6 signed by President Biden. And this bipartisan spirit is what's brought us things like lower cost insulin, like better care for our veterans, and making sure there's enough water for fish and farmers and the rest of us. You can expect more of this bipartisanship from me. On the other hand, my opponent, Mr. Larkin, has already said that he aligns with some of the most extreme members of Congress, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. He is not rolling up his sleeves to go to Congress and work together. He's rolling up his sleeves to go to battle. He has already gone to battle with Frank Kuntz, the mayor of Wenatchee, by criticizing him for working with a Democrat to deliver for his people. This is not what we need more of in Congress. I will continue to be the bipartisan voice that you expect to move the ball forward and deliver for you. Thank you.
All right, thank you to you both. Let's get started here. So each of us will be asking questions pertaining to a specific topic. We'll start with David when it comes to elections and voting rights.
This first question is for both of you, starting with Congresswoman Schrier. Earlier today, U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband was assaulted with a hammer at his home. The alleged attacker shouted, "Where is Nancy?" and has reportedly posted conspiracy theories on social media about issues including the 2020 election and the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Congresswoman Schrier, what's your reaction to this news and your message to voters in the 8th Congressional District?
Well, first, let me just say that I was so alarmed when I woke up to that news this morning, and that I send my prayers, our family's prayers, for a speedy and complete recovery to Paul Pelosi. I think this is emblematic of so much that's going wrong in our country right now, that there is so much hate, so much vitriol, and so much animosity. And we need to all just turn down the volume, because when we paint the other party as the enemy, it riles up this kind of discourse. Words matter, and words particularly of politicians matter, because they're heard by so many people. And when we use our words without care, and crazy people with weapons take those as a cue to commit crimes, we become culpable. So I send my best wishes to the family, and I hope that we can all turn the volume down and come together as a country.
Mr. Larkin, same question to you. Your reaction to the news and your message to voters in the 8th Congressional District.
Sure. When I read that news this morning, I was horrified. I mean, the volume of noise and hatred right now, especially in politics, is out of control. When I worked for President Bush in the White House towards the end of his administration, I used to say I didn't think it could get much worse. Boy, was I wrong. Things have escalated to a point where I think we all need to look in the mirror. We all need to turn down the noise a little bit. We all need to take a good hard look at the rhetoric. And only then can we move on in a bipartisan way and actually solve some problems that are plaguing this country right now. So this is, I completely condone the attacks. I'm just horrified. Our hearts and prayers are with the Pelosi family tonight. But we have to turn down the hate. We have to. And only then can we move forward. It's really sad what's going on right now.
Mr. Larkin, staying with you, former President Trump still claims the 2020 election was stolen without substantive proof. According to opinion polls, about 70% of Republicans now agree with him. And some turned to violence on January 6th. This year, the Department of Homeland Security is reporting unprecedented levels of threats and harassment targeting election officials. The question is, does President Trump have any responsibility for so many Americans believing false information about the 2020 election?
Look, I think we need to turn down the volume. Everyone who is screaming right now and mad and upset on both sides of the aisle can be blamed for this. And I think only when Congresswoman Schrier, or me, should I be the congressman in the 8th, take the lead on calming people down, will we actually have real progress in this. We have a rhetoric that's out of control, and both sides are to blame. It's not just the other party. My party can take blame for that too. But it takes coming together. It takes actually admitting that to move forward. And frankly, the kind of stuff that we're seeing out of D.C. and the rhetoric needs to stop immediately.
Dr. Schrier.
I'll answer your question directly. I said that politicians need to use their words carefully. President Trump has the biggest megaphone in the country, and he does bear culpability for what happened on January 6th. I was there that day, and it was scary. I feel like this is really a threat to our democracy, that when you start stoking doubt about elections, about whether votes count, casting aspersions on our system, even vilifying election workers, you're really tugging at the underpinnings of our democracy. I mean, when we lose faith in the vote, our democracy falls apart. This democracy takes work, and we all need to be able to vote like we do here in Washington State, where every vote counts, and we need to have confidence in our elections and respect the results of free and fair elections.
Congresswoman Schrier, staying with you. Some Republicans say Democrats have a double standard on false claims about stolen elections. They point to 2018, for example, when Democrat Stacey Abrams was a candidate for the governor of Georgia and said the election was stolen. Was it wrong for her to use that language?
I can't comment on what another politician has said. What I can say now is that I accept the election system that we have in this country. I respect election workers who volunteer for those jobs. I will respect the results of this election. And I really hope that I can say the same for my colleagues. Many of them are so extreme, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who continues to cast doubt, and that rhetoric is really destroying our democracy.
Mr. Larkin.
Same question.
Do you want to respond?
Oh, well, there's not much to respond to. I think there is a double standard. I think you're right. I think both parties are guilty of calling out election fraud and not agreeing with election results. And I think that is dangerous to a democracy. One of the worst things that I hear on the campaign trail is that people don't trust the election systems anymore. And that's heartbreaking to me as a citizen and as a father and as a candidate, because people need to believe in their elections, and they need to believe that they're sound and that they're fair. And they don't right now in a lot of places in the country. So we need to do a better job of showing transparency on the election system, and we need to do a better job of pointing out the hypocrisy on both sides of the aisle on this. And only then, again, can we come together in the middle and move forward on this topic.
Hannah?
All right, our next topic is the economy. When it comes to inflation, September's data by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says apparel is up 5%, used cars escalated 7%, food 11%, and energy prices up nearly 20% from just a year ago. Congresswoman, as the incumbent, I'm going to direct this question to you. People are struggling right now to get basic needs. Did you ever question that the policies you voted for so far played a role in driving up some of these prices? You have 60 seconds.
You're right. People are suffering right now. The cost of groceries, the cost of gas, we are all feeling it. And I think what's even more frustrating is when you dig a little deeper and you find out the gas and oil companies are right now making record profits, like the highest in more than a decade, and quarter over quarter those profits are going up. Grocery stores, we just had earnings reports. Their profits are also going up at a time when Americans are having trouble paying. That's why I have really taken this on. Passing legislation through the House to crack down on price gouging by gas and oil companies, making sure that I push this administration to suspend the federal gas tax, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, capping insulin for seniors at $35, and cutting insurance premiums. It's the reason I'm working on supply chains, because I'm committed to making life better for the people in the 8th District.
I have a follow-up question to that, because the question is specifically about policies that you have voted for. Economists so far have agreed that the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill contributed somewhat to inflation. So in retrospect, would you vote for it again, as is? You have 60 seconds.
There are a lot of causes for inflation. I want to walk you back to where we were when we passed that bill early in 2021. Nobody had been vaccinated. Many of our children were not yet in school. Businesses were hanging on by a thread, including many businesses here in the 8th District. And the bill that we passed kept those businesses afloat. It rolled out vaccinations all across this country that got us back to work and got our children back in school safely where they remain today. It rescued our economy, and it helped our economy bounce back faster than any other economy in the world. In a bill like this, you either hit a little high or a little low. This was the right response for the peril that our country was in at that time.
So am I hearing you correct? I want to clarify. So you're saying that you, in retrospect, would do the same today?
I support the bill that I voted for, the American Rescue Plan.
Do you have a rebuttal to what she has to say?
Yeah, I've got a lot of rebuttals, actually. She admitted before she voted for that it could lead to inflation, and she did it anyway, and I think that was reckless. And we need to take a good hard look at the amount. That was a $1.9 trillion bill. That's a huge price tag. So that bill never should have been voted for. And in the price gouging bill that she referenced, it was not, the only bipartisan thing about it were the Democrats who voted against it and the Democratic economists who said it wouldn't work, because the price gouging is not the issue when it comes to energy. It's a supply issue. And we'll get to that later, I'm sure, but yeah, that's my rebuttal. I think that bill never should have been voted for.
So this leads to your question, Mr. Larkin. You say there is overspending and it's time to cut. So if you were elected, what is the one thing you would slash, and explain how that would actually bring down inflation in a meaningful way? And please be specific. 60 seconds.
Sure. Well, I tell you, I'll start by saying I wouldn't have voted for any of the trillion-dollar bills that have come over the last 2 years, including the $1.9 trillion bill, including the Build Back Better bill, which was $2.3 trillion. I think there's a whole bunch of things that we need to take a good hard look at. And as a business owner, when I get to Congress, I plan on looking at everything line by line on the budget and going with the pen and looking at how we can cut, how we can rebound from this disaster of inflation that we're seeing, and not just go along with my party 100% of the time. My opponent votes with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden 100% of the time. That's not in line with the American voters here in the 8th Congressional District. One thing I would look at immediately are the IRS agents that were just funded, to your question. We just hired 87,000 more IRS agents in a time when we're sliding into a recession. That's reckless. They're going to be auditing all of the folks in the middle class, squeezing them at a time when they can't afford to be squeezed. And that's not okay. So there's going to be a whole bunch of things that I go over in the budget.
Mr. Larkin, you're out of time. Would you like to rebut that?
I would. A couple things. We heard a lot of talk about cuts, but we haven't heard any specifics except one on how Mr. Larkin would address inflation. There's a lot of talk about it and a lot of blame, but he's only offered one solution, which is cutting wages in half for the lowest earners here in Washington State. He would like to cut the minimum wage from where it currently is at $15 an hour down to where the federal minimum wage is at $7.25 at a time when Americans are having trouble affording everything, as we talked about a moment ago. That's unconscionable and outrageous.
One of the things that the Congresswoman has said about you in the campaign is that some of your cuts would also cut down on VA benefits. How do you respond to that?
It's an absolute fabrication. I'd like to take this moment to respond to every veteran in Washington State. I will not cut veterans' benefits, period. I'm actually excited to give veterans better treatment, more treatment, better care. And let me be also clear that I'm not going to cut Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. This is a time when people are depending on those things. They've paid into it, they've earned it, they deserve it.
So let's talk gas prices now, impacting so many of us. What can we do moving forward that will actually make a difference now, sooner than later?
First, let me just clarify, Mr. Larkin, those were your own words, that the only government spending on health
Is this
care
a
should
rebuttal?
be...
Is this a rebuttal?
It's the beginning of my next question. Or it could be a rebuttal. Do I get a rebuttal on everything?
Go ahead, go ahead.
My rebuttal is, these are your own words, Mr. Larkin, that the only government healthcare spending you said should be Medicare and Medicaid, and that leaves out our veterans. It throws them under a bus. I, on the other hand, have been working hard to make sure our veterans get the best care they can at the community-based clinic in Wenatchee. I have been working, I got $100 million with my colleagues for an additional clinic at American Lake, and I'm making sure that this administration, I've gone toe-to-toe with them, that they do not roll out this electronic health record system until they get it straightened out.
We're out of time, Congresswoman.
In Spokane. Thank you.
Let's talk about gas prices.
Yeah.
Plan going forward to address it now rather than later.
So, it's interesting when we talk about gas prices. First of all, the profits that oil and gas companies have been making off of our backs are astonishing and, frankly, repulsive. And so I got to grill oil executives in a committee hearing, and I asked every one of them, hey, can you just turn back on the oil rigs you turned off during the pandemic? Simply make supply match demand, because demand was picking up as we all got back to work. And every one of them, they said no, that their obligation was to their shareholders and that this was for stock buybacks. That's wrong, it's unconscionable, and it's the reason that Representative Katie Porter and I together wrote a bill to crack down on price gouging by oil and gas companies.
Thank you. What is your response to gas prices?
Well, they need to come down. They're out of control right now, and we've got to do something about it. But it's not price gouging that's bringing them up. It's this war on domestic energy that we've been seeing from Kim Schrier, from the Biden administration, and from Nancy Pelosi. On President Biden's first day in office, he declared war on energy independence, and he dried up all of our drilling and Keystone Pipeline projects that are going on here domestically. That led to a shrinking supply, which led to a greater gas price and led to shortages. These are the problems. And what the Congresswoman has said in the past is that if you don't think that Vladimir Putin is the only one to blame for the gas prices, you're un-American. A few weeks later, she was blaming the oil companies. I don't know who she's going to blame next, but at some point the buck stops with those in leadership, those who are sitting at the steering wheel of the car. We need better policies.
Would you like to rebut?
I blame the gas and oil companies. They're price gouging, and they're making record profits while we're suffering at the gas pump. Period. End of story.
I do want to follow up, though. Both of you have kind of pointed fingers here, you to oil companies, and you're saying that we are not doing enough domestically. But what plan moving forward? I don't think there's an answer there from both of you. If you want to answer that again, what policies can you do moving forward that you think will help Americans with gas prices?
Look, there's several things that we've already done. The president released from the Strategic National Stockpile. I wrote a letter asking for him to release more from the Strategic National Stockpile to lower prices for Americans and to put pressure on Saudi Arabia. In addition, we have a bill that hopefully will make its way through the Senate to crack down on price gouging. But then there's the elephant in the room, which is that we do need to transition away from fossil fuels so that we are not tethered to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and Russia for our energy supply. We are energy independent. We drill here. We also have solar and wind, and we are blessed with hydropower here in the Northwest. This is why we passed the biggest climate legislation ever to invest in jobs right here, in research right here, to build a clean energy economy and not be reliant on dangerous countries.
Mr. Larkin, would you like to respond more?
Sure, yeah. Look, we need to be energy independent. That's the solution. That starts by drilling where we can drill as cleanly as possible here domestically in North America. But that starts with a multi-prong approach as well, from solar, wind, energy. All of these things are good. Hydro is good. We need a multi-prong approach to this. But draining the federal oil reserves is a dangerous thing to do. Those are set in place for an extreme emergency. global catastrophe, war, things like that. Calling to drain the energy reserves during a non-wartime for the United States is dangerous. It's a bad decision, and I think it shouldn't have been done. All it did is lower prices temporarily. It was a Band-Aid when we needed a cast. So I'm in favor of all of the above energy approaches and look forward to empowering private industry to actually solve these problems.
We have to move on now, and it's about abortion and reproductive rights, and we go to Madison Wade for that.
Hannah, thank you. Since the overturn of Roe v. Wade, reproductive rights and abortion has been a center of conversation for many campaigns. Both of you have been vocal about where you stand on this issue. I first want to start with you, Mr. Larkin. Some lawmakers in Congress believe the 10-year-old Ohio girl who crossed state lines to receive an abortion in Indiana should have had to carry her pregnancy to term. You said the only time abortion is justified is to save the life of a mother, not including cases of rape or incest. If you were to help draft a federal ban on abortion, what exceptions or limits would you want to include?
Look, this is a deeply personal topic. I understand the emotion behind it on both sides of the aisle. I do. I completely understand why you could be passionately pro-choice. I do. And I understand the logic of someone who's passionately pro-life. We need to be affirming and defending life in this country as much as possible. But let me be clear, nothing is changing in Washington state. Women are not losing access to safe and legal abortions, nor will they. The court has ruled this is a state's issue, and I'm extremely happy with it being at the state level. I'm not planning on going back to D.C. and pushing for a federal abortion ban. That's not in my topic playbook. I've got other things to worry about. The destroyed economy, the reckless spending, the energy prices, the food prices, the gas prices. These are things I'm going to be focusing on in Washington, D.C.
Congresswoman Schrier, response?
When the Supreme Court overturned Roe, that was a devastating decision. It was a gut punch for American women who have had the right to a safe, legal abortion for 50 years. And now girls have fewer rights than their mothers or their grandmothers. And what we're seeing across the country is legislatures taking away the right to an abortion, banning it in some cases from the moment of conception and with no exceptions for rape or incest. And although my opponent states differently now that he is in a general election, that is exactly what he supports, and you already noted that he has said with no exceptions for rape or incest. It's outrageous, it's extreme, it's out of touch, and I want to be clear that such a ban would affect us here in Washington state, that a national ban would override the protections we have in Washington state. Don't be fooled, it's an extreme and dangerous agenda.
And we want to stay with you, Congresswoman Schrier. You support a federal law to protect the right to abortion, as you have stated. Should any exceptions be written into law that protects the right to abortion?
This is a healthcare decision that needs to be made by a woman and her doctor, not the government.
Response, Mr. Larkin?
Yeah, we know her position on that. She's voted twice and co-sponsored a bill allowing for abortions up until the moment of delivery, for any reason whatsoever, federally funded. What that means is gender selection could be a reason. That means if you're a minute from having a baby and it's a girl and you wanted a boy, you can terminate that baby's life minutes before delivery. That's an extreme position. That's extreme to 90% of the American public. So I'm not the extreme one in my position here.
Please keep it down.
Congresswoman Schrier?
Yeah, Mr. Larkin is making things up and talking about things that no woman or doctor would do in order to hide his own extreme position on this, which is banning abortion entirely with no exceptions, in his own words, for rape or incest or things like that. That is extreme, it's dangerous, a national ban would override our protections here, and he is just trying to deflect with, frankly, insulting comments. I trust women. I trust the women of Washington state. I trust women and doctors across this country to make the right decision.
Congresswoman Schrier, thank you. Mr. Larkin, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, another big topic right now for a lot of people is crime, and we go to Tracy Dial.
Thank you, Hannah. Mr. Larkin, we'll begin with you. More Americans died of gun-related injuries in 2020 than any other year on record. America has the highest rate of gun deaths among the world's wealthy nations. That's suicides, homicides, accidents. For the first time in decades, major gun control legislation was passed this year. What do you agree with and or disagree with in these new laws?
Well, first of all, that's a great point. We have rising violent crime everywhere across the country. In King County, which makes up 55% of our district, murders are up 72% over last year. That's alarming. As a father of 4 little kids, that scares me. We've got to do something about violence. We've got to do something about rising crime. And the way to solve that is by backing our brave men and women in blue and giving them the tools, training, and resources needed to do their jobs effectively. That's how we crack down on these crimes. That's why our campaign slogan, "Make Crime Illegal Again," is embraced by law enforcement everywhere in Washington state. I've been endorsed by every elected sheriff in the 8th Congressional District, been endorsed by the Seattle Police Officers Guild. I've been endorsed by WACOPs in the King County Police Officers Guild. They know that I will have their backs because they know that they're doing a tough job, and it's only when we help them do their jobs that we see safer communities.
Do you agree with or disagree with anything in those new laws?
Look, I'm willing to sit down with anyone at any time to talk about ways to keep illegal guns out of the hands of violent criminals, period. I am. We have to balance that with the rights of law-abiding gun owners in this state and balance it with the Second Amendment protection that guarantees them a right to keep and bear an arm. So these things I'm open to suggestions, but there needs to be a balance. And we don't see that balance from my opponent, who votes with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time on these things. This is a moderate district, as you all have pointed out. It's a purple district. And there's farmers on the east side of the state who are concerned, rightfully so, about their losing their ability to access firearms. And there's people on the west side of the state who are scared. They're scared that they're going to be shot by these firearms. So I am all ears. I want to make that perfectly clear, that I am all for public safety and will do whatever I can as long as it balances those two things.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin. Congresswoman Schrier, do you have a rebuttal?
That sounded like a lot of ducking and dodging to me. The question was about guns and safe gun ownership. I recognize Second Amendment rights, and I respect them. I'm also a pediatrician and a mom, and I know that guns are the #1 cause of death in children in this country. And that is why we need safe gun ownership legislation, much like what we passed through the House, the Senate, and was signed by the White House. These are common sense steps. Enhanced background checks to make sure that guns don't get into the hands of criminals, making sure that guns are locked up and away from children, and making sure that states like ours that have red flag laws have the resources to enforce those. You know, we need to have our children safe from guns in this country.
Congresswoman Schrier, you're touting your efforts in Congress to further fund police. Right now, departments here and around the nation are struggling to keep officers and to recruit new ones. What can you do on the federal level to staff these departments and also hold them accountable at the same time?
You're exactly right. Our police need more staffing, and they have asked me for more resources and equipment. You know, as crime has been rising, I've been out in cars riding with police officers all over this district to hear what they're worried about, to see what they're seeing on a daily basis, to see the risk that they put themselves in, to see how well they know their communities. And there have been consistent requests. One is to have others do what I did and ride along to hear their stories. 2 is to get more funding and resources for hiring. And 3 is for body cameras and social workers to help them do their jobs. That is why I have increased funding for state, local, community policing by $200 million, consistently increasing funding. And for King County Sheriff, have brought $2 million for body cameras and social workers as they requested. I stand with our police.
Thank you. Do you have a rebuttal, Mr. Larkin?
Yeah, I mean, the Congresswoman says she stands with our police, but she was silent for 3 years during the defund movement, noticeably silent. I wasn't even running for Congress, and I heard people talking about, where is Congresswoman Schrier on this issue? This is a really important issue to a lot of people. A lot of people go home every night to their spouses, who are men and women in blue, putting their lives on the line every single day, and they felt like no one had their backs. I will have their backs, and that includes getting them more funding, resources, tools, training that they need. That includes giving hiring bonuses in the form of federal grants to help retain law enforcement officials at places like Seattle. I've done ride-alongs with police too, and the word I'm hearing is they do not feel like the Congresswoman has their back.
Mr. Larkin. Thank you. Hannah?
Thank you. So we're turning now to the topic of immigration and border security. When it comes to illegal immigration, according to CPB, there are more than 2.7 million undocumented immigrant crossings by the end of September of this year. That means there are more than 1 million more crossings this year than in 2021. First part question of that is this situation acceptable? If not, how do you suggest we change it? We're going to start with you, Congresswoman.
Yep, the situation at our southern border is chaotic and totally unacceptable, and I have pushed this administration to get organized and get the resources we need for Border Patrol to have a safe and orderly process at the southern border, certainly before reversing Title 42. We need also to have a humane system of immigration. We need to have adequate staffing at the border, judges to hear stories, so people making a legitimate case for asylum can come, have their case heard, and be given a quick yes or no, you can stay or you need to go back. But we do need order, we do need staffing, and I have funded almost $100 billion for Border Patrol to help them do their jobs. The situation at the southern border is unacceptable.
So that same question goes to you. Is it acceptable? And if not, how would you suggest we change it?
No, of course it's not acceptable. I mean, we have fentanyl flowing up through our southern border at record levels. It's the #1 killer of people aged 18 to 45 in this country. We lost the son of a close family friend not too long ago to a fentanyl overdose. And now they're color coding it so it looks like candy. And my wife and I are scared to death that my little girl, my 4-year-old, is going to put one of those in her mouth and be dead within 60 seconds. She finds it in a park or finds it near a Halloween bag. These are scary, scary times. We have a crisis at the southern border. And when your ship is sinking, you patch the holes in the ship. Then you figure out what to do with the water that's in the ship. We need to patch our southern border. It is open, it is broken, there is chaos, and we need to do something about it. Then we need to reform our immigration system. I've been working with a friend of mine, Fernando, on getting his immigration cleared here in this country. Guess how long he's been waiting? 12 years, and he's done everything right. He's been waiting 3 years just for a court date. That's not right. He deserves better than that.
So you brought up fentanyl, and that leads to my next question. The DEA says fentanyl is the single deadliest drug threat our nation has ever encountered, and it's pouring in through the southern border. Outside of the suggestion that we are going to fund Border Patrol more, because that is something we have heard before, what new idea would you bring to the table if you were elected to stop fentanyl from pouring into the southern border?
Sure. Well, first of all, we beef up our southern border. We do that not just funding Border Patrol. We do that by building a strong system where people can't get across. We need to make it hard for people to get in illegally and easy for people to be here legally. That's how I view this. It's quite simple. You don't want to incentivize the bad behavior. You want to incentivize the good behavior. But we need to enforce the laws that are on the books more and actually hold people's feet to the fire. These drug dealers who are flooding this stuff into our communities. We're not getting hard on drugs at all right now in this country, especially in Washington state. There's a feeling that drugs are legal. Essentially they are. They're de facto legal. And we need to be holding drug dealers accountable. They're the ones flooding these things into our schools, into our kids. These are people that are horrible, horrible people, and they need to be dealt with appropriately. And I think that deterrent factor will make a big difference in cleaning up our streets and getting these horrible drugs out of our children.
Follow up to that, you said that make it harder for people to come in. How do you logistically do that when you cannot control people who are willingly and many times risking their lives to get here?
Oh yeah, it's not just drug dealers, let me be clear, who are flooding drugs over the southern border. They're a tragic, tragic story. We have a humanitarian crisis at the southern border. It's out of control. There's sex trafficking, there's human trafficking. It's terrifying. I mean, it's really out of control, and we need to do something to do that. And my opponent has gone along with the Biden policies 100% of the time on this. She hasn't. She says she's pushing back, but if that's pushing back, we need to. I wish you wouldn't push back. We need a new approach to this, and it needs to be drastic because things are dire down there. Law enforcement down there are pulling their hair out. We have no real solution to this. And in Congress, I'm going to work across the aisle to get bipartisan support to secure, finally, our southern border. And only then will we see these problems start to go away. But it takes being tough on it. It takes working across the aisle and not voting with your party 100% of the time. And it takes compromise to do that. And that's what I'll bring to the United States Congress.
Would you like to rebut? He has repeatedly said that you have voted 100% of the times with your party. How do you respond to that?
Well, I've heard those attacks, and they're not true, and I vote for what is good for the people in the 8th District. That means working with both parties, and as I mentioned at the very beginning, I have had 14 bills signed into law in these last 2 terms. 8 of them were signed by President Trump, and 6 of them were signed by President Biden. I would like to touch on the question of fentanyl, because I'm a pediatrician and I'm the mom of a 14-year-old, and I feel that threat acutely. It's the reason that I convened Department of Homeland Security, school superintendents, parents, emergency responders to come together and educate the community about these risks so that every parent and every teacher knows what they need to know and how to warn their children. It is also why I support police, and there's a push and a pull. They need to be able to arrest for drugs, to get people compelled into treatment, to stem the pull at the southern border.
Okay. Thank you. And we're going to go to Madison now about climate and the environment, including the wildfires that we saw this year.
The wildfire smoke that lingered for quite some time, weeks, and made air quality unhealthy for so many people in this district and other districts surrounding our area affected all of us. We all smelt it, we all felt it. What new policies would you propose on the federal level so our state is better equipped to prevent wildfires, to better handle those wildfires? And please be specific. We'll start with you, Mr. Larkin.
Sure, yeah, you're absolutely right. The wildfires were terrible. My son has asthma. We couldn't let him outside for weeks. And it was a real problem, and we're seeing it more and more. What I'm hearing from forest managers and people in government that I've talked to and reached out to talk about this problem is that it's mostly federal lands that are igniting in flames these days in Washington state. And it stemmed from forest mismanagement or lack of management. There's been a hands-off approach to fire management in our state. And it's only when we start thinning and doing things that the federal government hasn't done for the last 5 or 6 years that we start seeing these forest fires turn tide and change. And frankly, I agree with the Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, on this. He's now calling for better federal forest management, including clearing, burning, doing all sorts of things that will manage the forests in a much more efficient and better way.
Congresswoman Schrier, how would you propose new policies to better handle and equip firefighters to prevent those wildfires from getting out of hand?
So we are now choking on smoke every single summer, this year all the way into late October, and this is terrifying. It is the reason that I have worked so hard in these past 2 Congresses to shore up forest remediation. It is the reason that we got hundreds of millions of dollars into the infrastructure bill. It wasn't just roads and bridges infrastructure, it was also infrastructure in our national forests to pull out the underbrush and to do prescribed fire as a way to minimize the risk of these catastrophic wildfires. It's also the reason I've gotten extra funding for firefighters who take such risks to do this job. I also have to mention that this is yet another reason that our climate bill was so important, because the hotter our planet gets because of our burning of fossil fuels, the more risk we will see of catastrophic wildfires and extreme weather events.
Congresswoman Schrier, we'll stick with you for this next question, and then we'll have a chance to hear from you, Mr. Larkin. Data shows human-caused climate change has made the drought much more likely and longer fire seasons as well, coupled with that. More than a century ago, In the last 6 years, what has your political party done to address climate change? And do you think that approach is the right one?
So climate change is one of the most important challenges facing not just our country, but our entire world. It is why we worked so hard to make sure that we have the provisions I just talked about in the infrastructure bill for things like forest remediation, electric vehicle charging stations, and the infrastructure that we'll need for a clean energy economy. It's also the reason in the climate bill we are investing so much in research, including right here in Washington State. This means battery storage being built in Moses Lake. It means more efficiency in hydropower because that is clean, renewable energy. And it also means me pushing, the Secretary of Energy already knows that I am pushing to make Washington State one of the hydrogen hubs in this country to make sure that we lead on this transition off of fossil fuels and to a clean energy economy.
And Mr. Larkin, what has your political party done to address climate change? Do you believe that approach, the approach they're taking, is the right one?
Well, look, I think we all want a cleaner environment, including me. I've got 4 kids that I want to hand down a better world to. And both parties are doing things to mitigate this problem that we're seeing. Washington's number 2, for instance, in clean energy production. We're fantastic. We're behind Texas. Texas is the only state above us in this right now. So we have a fantastic model here in Washington State, and we need to implement that across the country. Both parties can do things to improve it as well, including opening up all options to clean energy. Not solely clean energy. I don't think we'll ever get to solely clean energy, but we need a multi-pronged approach, and we need to incentivize the private sector to help get us there. When you incentivize and empower businesses to come up with innovative solutions, you'd be amazed at what you can find. In fact, I was talking to some folks the other day, and they were talking about modular nuclear power, and it's a fantastic option. It's about 10 years away. There's a lot of exciting things out there.
Thank you. Hannah.
Thank you. The next topic, social issues with Tracy.
Thank you, Hannah. Congresswoman Schrier, an analysis of healthcare systems in the last few years ranked America last among high-income countries, but America's spending is first on that list. Congress does play a key role in our nation's healthcare system as far as funding, support, implementation. So is America's healthcare system properly funded, and how could it be improved?
Just a 1-minute answer on that one, huh? I am a physician. I've worked in this broken healthcare system, and I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. It is one of the reasons that I ran for office, because I think that everybody should be able to access care that they can afford. And that has been my North Star, whether that is bringing down premiums for health insurance so people can afford their care, or whether that is bringing down the cost of prescription drugs, like capping insulin at $35 for seniors, making vaccines for seniors free, and giving Medicare the power to negotiate the cost of prescription drugs. But I also have to tell you, as a pediatrician, we look upstream. What is causing these high costs, this sickness in our country? And that's why I'm focused as a member of the Agriculture Committee on what we can do early in life with our food programs for fruits and vegetables and healthier nutrition. We shouldn't just be providing calories with our nutrition programs. It should be nutrition to get us on a trajectory to not high blood pressure and diabetes later in life.
Thank you. Mr. Larkin, do you have a rebuttal?
Not a rebuttal. I think we do need to be looking at preventative care. I think it's fantastic. I think also, though, we need to be incentivizing drug companies to be coming up with new and innovative medicines. My mom is alive today because of that. She's a survivor of stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she shouldn't be here right now. She had a 5% chance of living, and it's a miracle that she's with us today. But those drugs made it possible for her to get through that. They made those miracles possible. And if we focus solely on drug pricing and not on innovation, I think we're missing a big segment of this. And we need to be doing that every single day. We need to be empowering them from the federal government, from the United States Congress, but we also need to keep an eye on prices. I agree, we need lower medicine prices. We do. But it can't come at the expense of innovation, because we are marching forward with leaps and bounds right now in innovation. I heard the other day that we may have a cancer drug that's being tested. My goodness, how amazing would that be? I'm optimistic about our future in this field for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Larkin. This
May I
next
speak
question.
up about medications? As a doctor, I want to know that my patients can afford the prescription drugs that I prescribe. And Mr. Larkin, even the best medication out there, the most innovative, won't help you if you cannot afford to purchase it. And that is why it was so momentous that we forced pharmaceutical companies to come to the table and negotiate with Medicare to get the best prices for our seniors so they can afford those medications. I will also tell you, as part of that was investing in the NIH and to drug research so we can have those innovative cures for things like Alzheimer's and others that are the holy grail. So we need medications we can afford.
Thank you. Thank you.
We want to spotlight now the 8th Congressional District itself. And for those questions, we want to turn it to David.
Mr. Larkin, as you said earlier, the 8th Congressional District is unique. It's not a red Republican district. It's not a blue Democratic district. It's more of a purple district. In fact, one of the only ones left in the entire United States. But when you were running the primary, you called yourself the most conservative Republican running in the race. So my question is, why is the most conservative Republican the right candidate to win this election in the 8th?
Well, because what you see is an extreme here. You see my opponent who's voting 100% of the time with Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. That's the extreme position. When my opponent, Congresswoman Schrier, first got into this race in 2018, her very first campaign video, her very first one, was ridiculing Congressman Dave Reichert for voting 84% of the time with his party. She thought that was extreme then. So I'd like to ask the Congresswoman, what would 2018 Kim Schrier say to 2022 Kim Schrier? Where is the extreme here? I think people want a congressperson who listens. They want a congressperson who's thoughtful, who will look over every single bill. They want someone who's going to evaluate and vote according to the values of the 8th Congressional District, and they're going to get that in me. I'm a thoughtful person, and I'm a listener. I tell my kids, you have one mouth, but you have two ears, and we need more people in government with that mindset.
Dr. Schrier.
Well, you're right. This is a purple district. I wish more districts were like the 8th district, because if that were the case, we would have so much more incentive for everybody to come towards the center instead of having just 30 of 435 districts be in the middle. Gerrymandering is a talk for another day, but this is why I have been so thoughtful about representing this district. 98 town halls. I'm in every corner of this district, listening and taking those concerns back to Congress. It is why I have been so intentional about finding partners in both parties to get work done that really matters for this district. We talked about fire mitigation before, but it includes water for the drier parts of this district. And it is why I am committed to continuing to work with both parties to deliver results for this district. We need moderation at this time, not an extremist like my opponent who aligns with Marjorie Taylor Greene and is not going to Congress to work together. He's going to make political points.
We're running out of time, but she did call you an extremist. 15 seconds to rebut that.
Yeah, she did. I think the extreme is how you're voting. Your voting record shows how extreme you are. And she is voting with her party literally 100% of the time. Not 96, not 97. I'm not rounding up. It's a literal 100% vote. That's extreme to me.
All right, it is time for closing statements. And we also did a coin toss earlier. Mr. Larkin, you get to go first. Closing statements, you have 60 seconds.
60 seconds, okay. Well, thank you again for letting us be here tonight. This has been a fantastic evening. It's great to debate the issues. We have problems right now. No one that I talk to. I've been to thousands of doors in the last year plus in this race, thousands. And everyone agrees that we have problems that need to be fixed. People are scared to go into their communities. They're scared to go into their parks. They're scared to go into their cities. They're worried about drugs, needles, homelessness, tents, trash. They're worried about the cost of goods, the cost of gas. Mothers are telling me they're trying to budget and decide between putting a gallon of gas in their car or take a trip to the grocery store. These are gut-wrenching decisions for so many people right now. We have record high inflation, and no one feels like anything is changing. There's no foreseeable end to this. We need change. We need balance of power. in government, and only when there's balance of power can we actually come to the middle and find real solutions to get these things under control. And you don't have that with my opponent, who's voting 100% of the time with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden.
Congresswoman, 60 seconds for closing statements, please.
Well, what you've heard this evening is a stark difference between two candidates for a very important office, a member of Congress for the 8th Congressional District. And on the one hand, you have Mr. Larkin, who has shown in so many ways this evening that he is far too extreme and out of touch for this district, whether it is his position on a national abortion ban with no exceptions for rape or incest that should be an automatic disqualifier, whether it is aligning with Marjorie Taylor Greene and other extremists in Congress who just want to blow the place up, or whether that is throwing our veterans under the bus and not funding the VA, or who criticizes other Republicans who work with Democrats. Look, what you have in me is somebody who works with both parties to deliver real results that matter for the 8th District, and that is what you can expect from me going forward. It's why I would be honored to earn your vote.
All right, thank you so much. And that is it for today's debate. We've run out of time. We want to thank the candidates again, Matt Larkin and Congresswoman Kim Schrier, for being here, and my fellow panelists of journalists here. We had Madison Wade from King 5 TV, Tracy Dial from KNDU TV, and David Hyde from KUOW Radio. Don't forget, Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. You'll need to get your ballots in on that date or into a ballot drop box by 8 p.m. that night. I'm Hannah Kim from Fox 13 News. From all of us here at McConnell Auditorium at Central Washington University, good night.
We've been watching the candidates for the 8th Congressional District as they debated live tonight from the campus of Central Washington University in Ellensburg. Of course, incumbent, I should say, Democratic candidate there, Kim Schrier, was talking there, debating with Republican Matt Larkin. They, of course, covered a number of different issues throughout. They talked about abortion. They also talked about every single issue that has been on the ballot for a lot of Washingtonians as they prepare to vote in this upcoming election. We have been able to speak with both Schrier and Larkin separately to talk to them about their take on all the issues that are facing so many people as they cast their ballots for Election Day. We sat down with each candidate to ask them directly questions that we heard tonight. Of course, there were a lot of answers given by the candidates tonight that really kind of dance around some of the issues. Of course, we would hope to get direct answers for them, which we were able to do just that. Our journalists here from King 5 were able to speak with both of them. And so if you'd like to see our conversations with both Kim Schrier and Matt Larkin, we have those for you up on our website, king5.com. We also have a number of various things for you to prepare for the election. A lot of resources as we prepare for Election Day. Those also can be found at king5.com. And of course, we have full conversations, not just if you saw the interviews with both Schrier and Larkin on our television station. You saw snippets of the conversation. You can see the full conversations on our website, king5.com. We also have a lot of other races that we have covered over the last couple of weeks here in all races for our state, including the important Secretary of State conversation that is also on our website if you'd like to see that as well. Jessica Jenner Castro sat down with both of those candidates to discuss the upcoming election, as well as also with every candidate we've asked them why they are a better choice over their opponent. In just a couple of minutes, our team here is going to be checking in with the King 5 political analysts. We're going to break down what they saw tonight in the conversation with both Schrier and Larkin. We're going to hear their reaction tonight coming up on Kong at 9 o'clock, also at 10 o'clock. And of course, we're going to have there for you also at 11 o'clock over on King 5. Remember to vote. Those ballots will be due back. You can return that in person or in a drop box by November 8th. Thanks for being here tonight. Good night.